Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Galucki, and welcome to the 426th Imagine Buffalo program and another great virtual Imagine lecture hosted by our wonderful Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. This 10-week summer series focuses on creating a culture of sustainability. We're asking the question, what would a sustainable community look like? I think the world needs examples of that, and we're trying to put all the good people in our community that are focusing on this issue from the public sector, the private sector, the educational sector, and like today's speaker, from the not-for-profit sector. So thank you so much for joining us today. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature, or Cezanne, as I pronounce the acronym, and ImagineLifelongLearning.com. We're going to start with our speakers shortly, but first, a little housekeeping. Everyone watching will be muted during our speaker's presentation, which will last about 15 minutes or so. We'll have time for questions at the end. So if you do have a question, please type it into the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can. This program is being recorded. You'll be able to watch it again later on the library's Facebook and YouTube channels. And we hope you'll share the link with your friends and networks. As a reminder, Life Willing will be here on Zoom every Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. with a great lineup of local speakers. Today's featured speaker is Jill Spisiak Jedlicka. She's the executive director of Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. Over the past 20 years, Jill has helped secure and implement over $100 million in federal, state, local, and private investments towards local initiatives throughout Western New York that have contributed to the region's waterfront and economic resurgence. Specifically, this includes the toxic sediment cleanup of the Buffalo River, large-scale habitat restoration, water quality improvement projects, public access to the waterfront, and Great Lakes policy. She is a Buffalo Business First 40 Under 40 awardee, New York State Woman Inc. Woman in Leadership honoree, and one of 20 people identified as a global Waterkeeper warrior. So now let's welcome Jill Spisiak Jedlicka. Jill?
Hi, Dennis. JD, thank you for having me today. And thank you all for taking time out of your days and your lunches to kind of listen and question and have hopefully a wonderful, robust conversation about our water and what it means for imagining sustainable communities now moving forward. And the essence, I think, is now, considering the world around us. So I'll just jump right into it, right? Is that, Dennis, is that what you want me to do with my presentation? So yes. Everybody fingers crossed that I will share my screen correctly. 16 months now of doing this, and hopefully we'll get it right. And share. Okay, hopefully you all can see that.
Looks good, Jill.
All right, victory. So thank you all again. My name is Jill Jedlicka. I am the executive director of Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. We are a nonprofit organization that has been around for over 30 years now, dedicated to just the protection and restoration of our water and our surrounding ecosystems, and also to connect people to water. It's what we do every day, and we can't do what we do without the assistance and energy from the community. So thank you all for any of you who are on here that actually volunteer with us or work with us as well. Real quick introduction, understanding our place in the world and who we are. I think many of you on this phone call and on the Zoom call understand that we live along the largest freshwater system in the world. And because of that great gift, that one-time gift from the glaciers, we also have a tremendous responsibility to protect that resource, not only for ourselves and our own health, but for the communities and for the generations that come after us. So the Great Lakes are critically important to how we sustain ourselves on a daily basis. Just hopefully look out the window and wave at Lake Erie, and you can thank Lake Erie and the Niagara River for keeping you alive. You are 75% of that lake. Your body is 75% of that. So just a little bit of reminder of where we come from and why we're here. This just describes some of the work that Waterkeeper does in our community. I won't spend any of our short time together really diving in too much, but I can tell you that I'm very, very lucky to work with some of the most incredibly dedicated, passionate advocates and professionals in Western New York. These folks are trained and understand our local ecosystems, and they work so hard every day to ensure that those ecosystems are protected for all of you and for the health of our community. Again, we protect, we restore, we connect, and we inspire. Our work is multifaceted, just like this conversation will be multifaceted when we talk about creating a culture of sustainability through the lens of water. A few factoids that you can all sound really smart at your next cocktail party or luncheon. So almost nearly 21% of the world's freshwater, 84% of North America's freshwater, 95% of the United States freshwater is in the Great Lakes, and that flows through our front yard every day. New York State is a Great Lakes state. We often forget that. More than half of our state's land mass and land area flows into the Great Lakes system. Everything that happens on land affects the water, whether it's the pesticides that you put on your lawn or the oils and greases that drip from your vehicles onto the roadways, to how we use our lands, to how we maybe destroy wetlands or forested headwater areas. Everything we do is directly connected to our lakes. So what are the contextual issues that we're dealing with? We all know the industrial heritage of our region. We all, live it every day and have lived it for a long time, of what the challenges are to our water quality and impairments. Because we can't think through a sustainable future in a clear, pristine water system if we still don't acknowledge and deal with the sins of the past and the issues that we're still dealing with that are ongoing. So this list here, again, I won't read it to you, but it kind of gives you a concept and an idea to wrap your head around of, everything. There's not just linear things, one thing wrong, one issue here. A lot of times these drivers, these water quality impairment drivers kind of coalesce and manifest themselves in different ways. So when we go out and we set our eyes on restoring a river system, it's not just about, filtering that water or improving the sewage treatment plant. We've got to contemplate all the other multidisciplinary and multiple components that go into that system. Mother Nature is very complex, and you need a healthy respect and understanding of that system in order to first do no harm, but also restore back to the splendor that we can. We like to say that water defined our history and it will define our future. Here in Western New York, in Buffalo, Niagara Falls, Western New York region, we are here because of our fresh water. There was, even before European settlement, the native populations this is their territory. This is their home for millennia. Worked in concert with nature and survived and thrived because of their respect of the systems themselves. It wasn't until European settlement that we really started to look at these resources as something to exploit. Which ultimately ended up giving us some of the legacy issues that we have. Water certainly will be our future. This RiverWorks is one example of the blue economy playing out right before our very eyes. And it's very intentional. So we can talk about that in a little while. So again, for context, where we've come from and where we're headed. I always pull this quote out in a lot of the presentations just so folks can understand. You don't want your waterways or your rivers to be called repulsive holding basins. Who wants to live in that community? Who wants to live along a repulsive holding basin? And this is my ultimate favorite quote. I use it almost in every presentation. This was what was described the Buffalo River in 1968. Your river is a boundless mosaic of color. Okay, that's not normal. We don't want that in our waterways. And then sometimes folks, after all the work that we've done in the community, you think, okay, job over, we've cleaned it up, we've restored it. That's the sins of last generation. We don't have to deal with that anymore, right? Take a look at this. Here's our boundless mosaic of color. And this is just recently in the last 5 years, what we are still doing to our waterways, what is still happening. The discharges, the unregulated discharges, the illegal dumping of oils, which is on the right-hand side, the stormwater overflows that are happening and triggering the inputs of this material and so forth in our waterways. And sometimes, a lot of times, we don't actually see, at least these colors and these contaminants allow us to visualize the contamination that's happening. So much more is ending up in our water supplies, whether it's here in Western New York or in the Great Lakes abroad, that we actually can't see, but it's there. And we know those inputs are still happening. And of course, the famous black discharge in Niagara Falls in 2017. So you can either, dwell on the overwhelming stress that comes with recognizing and acknowledging climate change is real. It's happening. It is affecting our great. Somehow I got muted. Where did I leave off?
You're back.
Okay.
Right at climate change.
Oh, okay. So, what do we do about it? So we know we have these ongoing problems. We recognize and acknowledge climate change is real. It's happening. We see it manifest itself in many different ways. We can become overwhelmed by that. And a lot of times what we see over and over again, it's easier to either deny or, run away from it, or to just focus on, okay, whatever is happening now, what are we going to do? We need to be able to survive. From our perspective, in things like climate and ongoing pollution, it's not an either or proposition. You both have to acknowledge the source of the major issues, climate, ongoing pollution, habitat destruction, as well as work on the solutions, because that coming together truly will give you a sustainable future. Organizations like ours, I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback. I don't know if there's some background noise. So our organizations like ours work really hard every day as professionals to tackle these problems, but we also find the strength in numbers. So our work becomes much easier. Our work becomes much more street cred, for lack of another term, when we have a community that's supporting us and the mission of restoring and protecting our water. So inspiring community stewardship and activism. Folks may think, I'm just a single individual. What can I do that's possibly going to make a difference? You will be surprised how that chorus of voices comes together very quickly, and how the actions of individuals can be multiplied to really have impact. And we do see that playing out. So one of the ways you can change the conversation and perspective is looking through a lens of transition. We've been in Western New York and Buffalo, have been marginalized and spoken to in the past about, okay, you're a Rust Belt community. What is the future there? What is going on? But when we start to talk about transitions, we're transitioning away from that rust mentality to more one that's driven by a blue economy. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Excuse me. So when you change the conversation, you start to change the paradigms and the way people think and look and value things. We're talking about valuing our water more than just a resource to exploit, more than just drinking water. But can you imagine to say just drinking water? I mean, that is what we need to survive. But our water-based economy, we have a recreational value, there's aesthetic values, there's economic, there's ecosystem value. We've got to start to change that conversation. And value is not always just monetary. There is a lot of intangibles about that as well. So how do we shift our regional economy and continue to push away from an industrial driven and, how do we use and abuse this resource? Well, it's happened in fits and starts over the decades, but in recent years, and when we first started talking about rust to blue and blue economy now about a decade ago, these were the real 5 basic principles behind what a blue economy means. That you cannot have a healthy economy and healthy community, individuals without healthy clean water. That's the basis right there. Public access to these spaces and protection of these resources should be a priority, not an afterthought. We've seen that over and over again with the different planning documents that come out of regional planning organizations. How do we take what was once and always referred to as the best designed city and really return the waterfront back to its people? How do we put the water back in the waterfront? You can have a best designed city, but if everybody's afraid to touch the water and can't access it because you get brownfields and hazardous waste sites and fences and God knows what, that's not truly a healthy community. So natural systems also should be designed into redevelopment. This is where we talk about utilizing natural green infrastructure and what we have always referred to as living infrastructure. We can't just pipe everything and ditch everything. We need to use our wetlands, use our forested areas, use our green spaces as part of the built environment that we can live cohesively within both the built environment for humans and then the natural environment as well. We talk about the Niagara River or the Niagara Greenway and the Blue Way as really catalysts for waterfront revitalizations. We are seeing water-based businesses explode along the restored Buffalo Riverfront, the tourism industry, the waterfront, the demand for waterfront living, waterfront businesses, the, just having people come down to the waterfront and watch a sunset without worrying about the health of their kids running around on the shoreline next to it. So a lot of that also drives revitalization. Investors and businesses want to be where the people are. People want to be where they feel safe and healthy and can enjoy themselves. And it's really, it goes hand in hand. And finally, public, private, and nonprofit partnerships. You hear those words a lot from elected leaders and from others, but you actually got to put it into practice and you got to mean it. And we were able to do that through our Buffalo River restoration. Here's an example of just some numbers for you, for any numbers folks out there, number geeks like me. The Blue Economy in Action. We had an economic study, several economic studies that were done around the restoration of the Buffalo River. And it's this multiplier effect of how you have targeted investments in waterfront revitalization and ecosystem and environmental restoration, the jobs they create, the induced investment that comes in. I can tell you when we first started our ambitions to restore the Buffalo River almost 15 more years ago, people would laugh us out of the room. They would say, good luck with that one. It's not going to happen. But once we were able to get the partners together to commit to this massive restoration, lo and behold, private investors started coming in and wanting to invest along the shoreline, even before the river was restored, because they knew what was coming. So when you as a community and as a society commit to a clean and healthy environment and restoring it, the other investment is going to naturally follow even before you put one shovel in the ground. So again, we're changing paradigms, changing values, changing the conversation. You have to influence kind of how our water is presented in the public forum. Again, now we start seeing more and more stories in the last 5-7 years all about restoration and all about being a water city and a waterfront community. You would find those few and far between more than a long time ago. So we're changing values, increasing investment in our stewardship activities, and I'm already looking like I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to kind of plow through some of these. You need to foster and embrace this cultural and behavioral shift, because it's not just about decisions from leaders within the community. You've got the community themselves need to kind of have a healthy respect for our water systems and define what our interactions with water are. And it goes beyond the nonprofit groups, it goes to the individuals as well. We always also like to say that informed stewards and folks make better decisions. Anybody, I usually, if I was in a presentation, I would say, does anybody know what this is? But obviously you're all muted, so you can't say anything. This is the buried Spisiak Creek. That back in the day, the best decision was to bury a polluted creek rather than clean it. And this is what's tragic and and really kind of insane, that it's cheaper and better to bury a creek in a 30-foot pipe and then build a road over it as well. When we can talk about the 33 and the 198 a whole other time. But happy to say we are starting a trajectory where we're actually now restoring this Spisiak Creek system. So that's good to see. Again, another image, shocking to think of what we did to our water systems. Again, just some images before and after. What does it mean to have a sustainable waterfront and a sustainable community? You have to have a vision. You got to take that vision into action, and then you get this physical change. You actually take your words and your passions and vision and make physical change in the environment. And once people start to see it happen, further investment can kind of go in, and future decisions can be built off of the proof of concept that restoring a waterfront, restoring a lake, restoring a creek is actually a good thing for the community. And so then I joke around this all the time. We have a lot of colleagues at the Army Corps of Engineers who I highly respect. They're wonderful people. They are not visionaries. And we've had a lot of time dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers mistakes in the past. This is their idea of shoreline restoration. And anybody who has children or grandchildren recognizes, like, is this like a Minecraft thing? Is this what they do to design? But it takes visionaries, and it takes folks, kind of looking at things differently. So this is one of the roles that Waterkeeper plays in the community, is how do you have a more sustainable ecosystem instead of just moving water quicker from one spot to the next? How can these waterfronts serve more than just one purpose? And then ultimately, this was the Forest Lawn project that we did put in the ground after having that bold vision. If you haven't been to Forest Lawn, I highly recommend it. So what's on the horizon? We are still cleaning up our legacy pollution and restoring habitats. That's probably another 10 or 20 years worth of work that we have to do in order to help make these systems more self-sustaining and regenerating on their own. We still find ourselves struggling and fighting to maintain federal and state clean water protections, especially after the last 4 years. There's been a kind of a sea change in the mentality around our water regulations and protections, but we don't know, what the next 4 years are going to behold. So we've got to make sure that is sustained moving forward. Great Lakes threats are always there, always have been, and in the umbrella of climate change, we have to address these issues at a much larger scale. And always just inspiring and getting involved with other folks. Again, I encourage folks who feel like these problems are too complex or too big for themselves to really wrap their heads around. There are still things you can do at the local level that make a difference. And here's just one list of some things that you can do. So I will stop rambling on, in terms of our view from a water lens about creating a sustainable community. And this is where we get to have a fun conversation. Thank you.
There we go. Wonderful presentation, Jill.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And we, in this series, have started with JD to begin our questioning. Somebody's got some background noise. If they could maybe mute themselves if that's possible, or cut that down. But JD, where do we take this Jill's presentation and kind of begin to ask a question of how we connect it with the whole series and your own thoughts about it? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Jill, and thank you and Waterkeeper for your leadership on this issue. So I'm very, very active with the Sustainable Business Roundtable, which is the private sector's, attempt at organizing themselves to make an impact, to have a vision and then put action to it, so there's some outcome, some impact. If you were able to give us our marching orders for, yeah, hold on one sec. Hey, Belinda. You know what? I'm going to mute myself right now. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I think I will just kind of carry on the lead of where I think JD was going in terms of, marching orders. What are some of the next steps? It's, don't be silent. We need individual voices to express their concern about the health of our Great Lakes, about the policies that are going into place, about decisions that key leaders make. Through my work, I travel to Albany and Washington, DC, Chicago. I try to go where the leaders are, both state and national leaders. And what they tell me over and over again is the power of citizen voices is truly impactful. When you fire off a letter to your elected official, something like that can easily be put on a desk and forgotten about. When you pick up the phone and call an elected official's office and express, hey, I'm really concerned about the IPCC report that just came out calling a code red on climate. We need to do something about this. Or I'm concerned about the emerging issue of cryptocurrency mining in New York State and the massive amount of energy use and what potential water pollution that comes with it. Every time you call or engage elected official that way, it gets logged down. It gets logged, and it probably carries more weight. One phone call carries more weight than 1,000 letters or emails. So it can be intimidating sometimes to call those offices, but they truly do. They do stick with them, and they do get heard by the elected officials. So that I can certainly say is a great action that individuals can take.
Leah, other questions from the audience?
We do have a few questions. The first one is, are there other examples of towns or cities along the Great Lakes leading the way with similar visions for water sustainability? Is there a collaborative effort in place?
That's a really good question. There are a lot of great projects happening in a lot of diffuse locations, and I think that's both the challenge and the opportunity. Is that, you know, we see some really inspiring waterfront revitalization efforts that do embrace natural systems as part of that. We see some of that in Detroit. We see it in Milwaukee. A lot of this we call it green infrastructure investments, are also incorporating job training programs in them as well. So it has a kind of a multiplier effect. There are numerous forums where folks, Great Lakes professionals, engage with each other. Obviously, I'm a member of the Waterkeeper Alliance. There's 350 waterkeepers all over the world. So we do communicate on a regular basis about best practices and successes and lessons learned. You have the Healing Our Waters Coalition, which is associated with Great Lakes as well. But believe it or not, you know, parts of Buffalo are also leaders in this thinking. You know, we have been celebrated internationally and recognized internationally for how we're reinventing our waterfront as part of building our new economy.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what can we do about the proposed Outer Harbor concert venue?
As I said before, let your voice be heard. There's a lot of concern about the proposal of the scale and the scope of that concert venue. I think it becomes a challenge because in the past, several advocates like ourselves at Waterkeeper have advocated for, you know, controlled, limited development on existing infrastructure, which is terminals A and B. You know, we won the first battles of making sure there was not going to be development on some of those open green spaces and that resilient shoreline that we wanted. But, you know, now there's the concern about what is going to be that potential negative impact on that concert venue. So rather than me, you know, telling you what your thoughts should be or what should, you know, what the correct answer is, let your voice be heard. Reach out to Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation and, you know, express what you feel is important about your waterfront.
Those are great steps.
Go ahead, Lee. I want to, and then we'll come back. You've got a few more questions, but I want to press Jill a little bit. But if you encourage development on those two sites, I'm confused. Why not allow that to happen? Or is it the nature of the development will bring too many cars, too much traffic on occasions that there is something there? I'm trying to understand the logic of how to even express an opinion because I too don't want to have what's there just stay there because it never gets removed. It's not doing the waterfront any good as is. And we're not going to, I don't think, get rid of it and make a green space out of it. But yet, what argument should the public consider making? I know you don't want to tell them what to do, but what's your consideration from the Waterkeeper rather?
Well, it's all about scope and context, right? It's exactly what you said. Just because there's an empty blank space there doesn't necessarily mean it's screaming for development. Sometimes the empty blank spaces should exist just because they are, in particular because the Outer Harbor is the front line to our Great Lakes. It is the equivalent of the wetlands down in Louisiana that protect from the tropical storms coming in. You know, we've got seiche effects that come in off the lake, that is the resilient shoreline that we need. Waterkeeper as an environmental organization has had to toe this line for decades on, where do we think is appropriate development versus non-development. And we always default back to, one, is the community voice being heard? Two, is what's being proposed truly a water dependent or, a water enhanced business? If it's not, it shouldn't even be considered for that location. And third, it's like, first, you want to do no harm or as little harm as possible. We don't want to create any more negative environmental impacts that our waters and our waterfront have already faced for generations. It's hard enough to restore these systems that, if you have systems that are doing okay, to have to kind of now put those at risk as well makes it another challenge. So with those sites, there is opportunities for low impact development, reuse, seasonal reuse that has minimal impact in terms of traffic, crowds, sound, water quality impairments. Those are big problems to address.
Jill, thanks. It's a current events problem, so I wanted to spend a few
Yeah.
more moments on. Leah, other questions?
Yes, we do have another. They say allegedly the huge infrastructure bill being debated in Congress has either $1 billion or $1 trillion in it for the Great Lakes. If it were up to you, how would you use those precious funds to make a difference in the Great Lakes, especially Erie?
Great question. And I can say it's not allegedly, it actually is in there. I've read the bill. And I actually, we had an event we did with Senator Schumer yesterday, who was in town to talk about this. So there is $1 billion with a B that has been dedicated for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative under the infrastructure bill. And this is in addition to the authorization that the annual appropriations that's happening under the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative through the normal budget mechanism. So now we're talking about $1.5 billion over the course of the next few years for this. And when you look at the bill and you look at the language and you look at the history of the GLRI, that's the shorthand for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. The GLRI has been the most impactful and successful piece of legislation in our nation's history. I can honestly say that. It shows anywhere from a 3 to 4 to 1 economic return, and it has made significant progress on areas of concern, contamination, ecosystem restoration. Now, how do we make sure that those dollars are deployed in Western New York and benefit us? And this is where the squeaky wheel, squeaky wheel is the answer. Unfortunately, we have to compete for those dollars for all the other Great Lakes states and areas that have just as many problems as we do. But fortunately, Waterkeeper and our partners in both government and the private sector and agencies, you have a whole group of dedicated professionals here in Western New York that are thinking about what are the priorities for our region. We've got the Niagara River area of concern that needs to be dealt with: contamination, dredged, habitat restoration. Skijaquota Creek, I will say that over and over and over again. Now is the time for Skijaquota Creek restoration. We've got sites in Niagara County. We've got sites in Erie County. But I can assure you that, if we had more time to talk about, Waterkeeper alone probably has a list of 20 priorities that we are going to be advocating in Washington, in New York, in Chicago to make those GLRI dollars come to Western New York.
Any others, Leah?
Those are all the questions. It looks like someone sent a kind of informational message that I will post in the chat for everyone to see.
Good, thank you for that.
Hey, Dennis, I'd like to ask Jill a similar, similar question, of how to spend a billion with a B5. How about, what would you ask of Western New York business community? What can they do other than have their, voices be heard?
Right. Dollars to leverage, I think, is critical. So you have, significant amount of private sector business that's benefiting from ecosystem restoration. And, they acknowledge that, and it's great. But we need stewardship, long-term stewardship. So we can work really hard to get the dollars in to restore these systems, but they have to be sustained. And unfortunately, oftentimes these dollars under GLRI, like the billion or the $500 million, these are the shots in the arm to actually solve the problems at hand. They are not necessarily the funding to sustain. So groups like ours, like Waterkeeper and others, have to continuously fundraise and look for partnerships so we can mobilize volunteers and folks in the community to make sure those habitat restoration projects sustain themselves. Habitat restoration takes 15, 20 years sometimes. And you have to be there, and you have to be restoring, cleaning, and monitoring. And that's where business and corporate partnerships and business leaders can step up.
Thank you.
Jill, sometimes we think we're doing this by ourselves. The purpose of this 10 weeks has been to say, wait a minute, we've got Erie County here. We've got New York State. We have the Power Authority. We have a congressman, Brian Higgins, we had speak. We've got a university in UB leading the educational efforts on a global scale and considered a leader. We've got a lot of pieces of this puzzle because otherwise it does feel just what can we do type of thing. But now suddenly with some resources and leadership, and not just one person, one group, but the whole, I'd like to think it's our generation's time to look at the beautiful vision that Olmsted had, to see the greening of all the brown spaces happen because the water is turning from multicolored back to its natural color. And all of that is our generation's challenge. It'll be future generations' challenge probably to figure out how to get the CO2 out of the atmosphere. But this is what's going on now. And it's people like you that have done this. I got to dedicate this program as I did. You have a relative in your last name of Spisiak. Let's see if you can see this. There it goes. All right. That's Stan. I had met Stan and I knew his son, John Spisiak, who died recently. And we had, this book was his effort written by John Zach. And there's copies at the library. That's why I'm giving it a nice plug. And find out the work he did in the 1960s to convince President Lyndon Johnson and his wife, Lady Bird, Bobby Kennedy. Back in the 60s, this is Buffalo's role in cleaning up the Great Lakes. And you're continuing that role in a mighty way by seeing all the watershed of the Great Lakes, all the tributaries coming into it, the Buffalo River especially, all the shoreline. So there's so much going on. It's actually a wonderful challenge and opportunity for our generation. So I keep emphasizing that. This series is part of that effort to connect the dots of all the good people doing great work to solve a big issue and work at it and feel good that they're doing their part. So Jill, thanks very much again for your presentation. I know you know our next speakers, Jay Jean and Jay Burney, a great team, not usually connected, but we're connecting them on this series, and I look forward to that. Folks, because you listen, we have an audience and a belief that things can get done because of the good people we're attracting as speakers and as listeners, and that's you. So keep coming back, share the links. Every one of these Imagine programs is on the library YouTube site. Go to their website and you'll find it. We hope you'll promote it and mention it to others. It's a great service the library is providing. I'm Dennis Galecki. Hope to see you next week. Be well and good afternoon.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks, Jill.
Thanks, everybody. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Bye. See you soon.
Bye.